Well, hey everyone, we are your whistleblowing shrinks, Dr. Teralyn and therapist Jenn, and this is the Gaslit Truth Podcast. Before we introduce our guest, we have two guests actually today. We need to give a quick shout out here, guys, for you on YouTube. You can see I'm holding this up to our newest brand partner, Orgain Organic Protein. We use this every day in my house. The newest thing we're putting it in is oatmeal now. All right. You can easily add 21 grams of protein to your coffees, your smoothies, your oatmeal post workout. Guys, protein provides the aminos. The amino acids are the building blocks of the body that we need to make neurotransmitters. It's that simple, and that's how we support healthy brain function. So please support the show. Check it out for yourself. You can visit the link in our YouTube description. Today, we have the conscience of psychiatry here with the other most important thing right behind every good man is a good woman. We've got Dr. Peter Breggin and Ginger Breggin here. Welcome to the show, guys.
Thank you.
Gosh,
I know,
it took a while for you guys to get here, but we are so happy that you are here. Yes.
We're so happy to be here. I think we started planning this last spring.
Probably like 2021. It's fine. We got here. So, guys, if you don't know Peter, Dr. Peter Breggin, he's in private practice in Ithaca, where he lives with Ginger and their small Yorkie. I don't have that. What's the name of your Yorkie? That's not in your bio.
Bella.
Okay. Bella gets a shout out. Got a shout out for Bella. Dr. Breggin continues to see patients. He has a private practice for therapy and psychiatric drug withdrawal and works as a medical expert in the psychiatric COVID-19 and freedom arenas. Peter graduated from Harvard College with honors, took part of his psychiatric residency was at Harvard, where he was a teaching fellow at the medical school. He then became a full-time consultant at the National Institute of Mental Health as an officer in the U.S. Public Health Service. Peter is known as the conscience of psychiatry for his many decades of successful reform work in mental health, including stopping and the return of lobotomy and similar transhumanistic experiments that were in the 1970s, and his dedicated scientific opposition to electroshock of children and adults. Since then, he has taught at the Washington School of Psychiatry, Johns Hopkins, and other universities. Peter and his wife Ginger were married in 1984 and have worked together as reformers ever since. Together, they stopped a giant eugenical program by the federal government in the late 1990s that aimed at identifying supposed biological and genetic defects in inner city children living in a lonely world. Like, is this not a good song? I mean, you're going to sing that one on the way out here today, Ginger.
No, I'm not.
So in the 90s, Peter was aiming at identifying supposed biological and genetic defects in inner city children that allegedly made them violent. How fascinating. This resulted in their co-authored book, The War Against Children of Color. Dr. Breggin has published more than 20 medical and popular books. Several co-edited and co-authored by Ginger include their huge bestseller, Taking Back to Prozac. Very good one. Talking Back to Prozac. You're right. I even have that book and I can't say the word right. Thank you. He has written more than 70 peer-reviewed publications and testified in court more than 100 times, with many cases related to the maleficence by physicians, drug companies, medical facilities, and governmental agencies. Peter and Ginger, in late 2021, co-authored and published the best-selling book COVID-19 and the Global Predators. We Are the Prey, with introductions by top COVID-19 scientists and physicians. Peter A. McCullough, Elizabeth Lee, Fleet, I said it, and Vladimir Zlenko, MD, may have said that wrong. COVID-19 and the Global Predators was also personally endorsed by the now Secretary of Health and Human Services, RFK Jr., having sold over 170,000 copies by the end of 2022. The Breggin's book is still the deepest examination of the worldwide forces behind this COVID-19 policies and practices. That doesn't even touch everything that you have done, Peter, and you as well, Ginger. But this has to be read because people need to know what you're going to listen to today on the show. This is the excellence that's sitting in front of you guys.
Thank you.
I want to add in there thousands of souls that you have touched and influenced and changed lives. So that is well beyond the scope of a publication. So I just want to thank you for all of that before we get started. And then I'm going to get all weepy and weird, and we're not going to do that today. We're going to start in because there is a topic that needs exploration today with you guys, because it's a topic that you don't necessarily talk much about, in my opinion.
Mhm.
So that topic is the topic of love. And Jenn brought this up before we got in because I believe in her episode on your show, you guys were talking about that with her. And there was a publication that never got published. And I think that publication deserves a little spotlight. And that's what we're going to do today.
That's great.
How's that sound?
Sounds very interesting.
It sounds like you're better. Well, you're the one talking about it, not me. So
Yeah.
Wish us all a lot of luck.
This is
good luck. Yes, we all need good luck on this conversation today. So
Actually, he's actually talks a lot about love and its relationship to good relationships with other people and within families. And he actually has he's done really important papers and a book called The Heart of Being Helpful, which was written for therapists, and about really how to open your heart and relate with your clients in a way that is healing. I can't remember the subtitle now, but
Healing aura, something about that.
yeah.
Healing aura. The subtitle has the term healing aura in it, as I remember. Wait a minute.
It's
should
not
have it
there.
written.
I don't see it. But
No.
his attention to love and his appreciation and understanding of its relationship to being a full human being has informed everything all along. It's why I love him.
So I want to ask a question, because where did that come from? The attention to love and connection, because I don't think that that's something that they teach in medical school, is it? Especially as a psychiatrist. So where did you learn to integrate that? Like, how did that become a curious place for you?
Well, I had a fairly loveless family life growing up. And I think it was a problem I was trying to figure out from early on in my childhood. And I remember when I was very young saying, when I grow up, I want to tell the adult world how hard it is to be a child. And so I was making a promise to myself and to other children, which is really all the world, I guess. And then I had a very unusual childhood, and my mother already had a husband and a son, and that was about as many men as she could possibly handle. And so when I was born, she imported, we were not a wealthy family. It was like as if we were a rich southern plantation. She imported a black child from way down south. We were up in Long Island to come live with us, who I think was about 16 at the time, and to basically raise me. So I grew up raised by a black child who was a Christian and taught me Christian prayers and sang Christian songs, I believe. And I met her years later, and we talked about the time period.
And this was literally from birth?
This would be from birth, sometime around
Literally.
birth. So she was my primary caretaker. And then I completely suppressed her existence, but wrote a novel called After the Good War. And in the novel, all the children in America, I'm a historian and I'm researching this in the novel, all the children in America are raised in houses, and it's all secret. Nobody is allowed to go back and find out what it's all about. But in essence, the story says that racism got to be such a bad point for a while that black people were totally separated from the white people, I think in zoos, as what I was saying was going on.
This is fiction.
This was a
Right,
fiction
right.
book. And that they found out that if there weren't black women to raise white children, we didn't have any white children with souls.
They like died, right?
Yeah, they
Children?
died from lack of love, or
It's like a repressed memory came out in a.
came out
Your
in a
novel.
novel.
Huh.
Which is, by the way, if you want a repressed memory example, there's none better because it's just so typical of what they're like. I mean, they really are repressed. You have no idea. In this case, I was being governed in the writing of a book by a part of my life I had no idea it existed. In
You
fact,
wrote the book before you remembered.
right.
Huh.
And then later on, I had a nightmare which involved my mother screaming at me about how much I loved this woman more than I loved her. And I thought, what woman is she talking about? She used the N-word. And so I thought to myself, who's she talking about? Well, I called one of my old family members who would have known very well what was going on back then, called a cousin of mine I was close to. He remembered very well who this person was and had a kind of general perspective on how she'd been brought into the family to sort of help out with in each woman's home when she got overwhelmed, and sort of was a general service person for the women of the family. And in this case, had been with me since I was born. And I think my mother was terribly abused as a child. She really had trouble loving men or boys. And so I was puzzling about that. And I remember the first time I ever heard anybody discuss love in public was when I was 16. Really discuss it all. I was dating Mary, and Mary invited me to go to church with her on Sunday. And when the preacher was speaking, he was talking about people loving one another. Jesus' famous saying he probably was talking about, which we should love God with all our heart and all our soul and all our body, and then we should love each other in the same way. He was talking to his disciples at the time. And it blew me away. I said, what is this conversation? I never heard anything like this.
Okay.
So it really came in pieces to me over the years. And then, like many people, I had terrible disasters with first love affairs. Fell in love with Judy, a girl down the street, who turned out to be a very fine woman. And she was several years younger than me, and I got teased about that. And I was very serious about her, and my mother and her mother broke up the relationship, and I probably never recovered. I think Ginger's still healing me from that. And then almost the exact same thing happened again when I was a young man. I met a woman at the Harvard Summer School. I was way back in the 50s, before people were doing like things like living together, and we lived together in her apartment. Her mother intervened and broke it up, and I'm probably still recovering from that one too. So I had a lot of these things though, where I really had felt very strongly about these people and completely had them removed from my life. So that's a very short story, but it's...
When did you remember that you had been actually separated from your family altogether at birth and living separately in a separate... there was not a lot of...
There was no conversation about it. There were no photographs of me and the lady that I...
And when they were
raised me and
together,
stuff
it's
like
not
that.
like they all sat down to dinner with the help.
No, I lived with the help in
And
a
they
little
separately.
tiny room. I went back and found that house, knocked on the door, and they let me in. And I went up and looked over the house, and I was like living practically in a closet with a little crib in it. I was in the crib.
And I think you remembered all of this when you were in your mid-30s or late 30s.
Yeah, I was in my 30s when this stuff started to come back.
Wow.
And that was associated with writing the book and the nightmare. And I think my mother was very jealous of any loves I had. I remember her complaining that I loved the Irish setter more than I loved her, because I was happier to hug the Irish setter than I was to hug my mother or my father, as if that were my fault.
What's interesting about this, Peter, is I might be stretching this, so maybe I'm doing the whole therapist thing where
Have a good time. Let's cut loose. I love
I'm
you.
gonna
Jenn.
call.
I
I'm
trust
gonna
you,
call
Greg.
up Sigmund Freud and wake him from the dead and be like, "What do you think of Breggin? I mean, this guy is losing it, right? Like you'd have
Well,
a field day with him."
I'll be Freud if you want.
You got.
When I was young, I wanted to grow up to know everything Freud knew and then to build on it. That was my goal as a
Okay.
psychologist.
So what's interesting
Until I started
to me?
really read Freud deeply.
This is his story. He's got a
Yeah.
really good
There's
story.
that part. Wait, Jen.
Then there's our stories that are like, well, I just wanted to like know psychopaths, and so you have a good story, Peter. Okay, I got to stay on track because I'll go squirreling off on this. The interesting part to me about this is the idea of love and the idea of having a memory. Okay. But when there isn't an emotion that is part of it, or that like is understood within it, how very little does that memory imprint itself? How very little does that, right? Like to be able to forget something or repress something, right? But was there a lack of a strong emotional tie that existed with it? I'm stretching this because I'm also thinking about the idea of psychiatric drugs and how memory is so impaired when we can't put an emotion with an event.
Well,
as
in
it's
this case,
numbed out.
In this case, the emotion of the event was that this lady, I'm reluctant to even use her name,
Right.
Basically was, I think, pretty much thrown out by my mother in a jealous fit, something close to that. And I went on, I became Peter Breggin. I went on a hunger strike. I wouldn't eat for these people, the white folks.
How old were you, honey?
I would have been 4 or 5 years old.
Right.
I remember battles over this, and finally they scared her to death by sending the sheriff to demand that she come back to the Breggins. She was in Brooklyn. She was about 45 minutes away, and that she told me it terrified her. She didn't know what was happening. Policeman comes and says, "You have to go back to Long Island, to the Breggins' house." And
do we know why? Okay, so Jenn is pointing out emotional blunting doesn't allow us to retain circumstances, because I had the same thing, like memories,
pain.
right?
It's
like,
just so painful. I mean, I went into a black depression that I did not begin to recover from until I was 12 years old.
Yeah.
So on that incident, so to remember that was to recall being a child. Attachment theory later, when I started reading the best outcome from Freudian theory was attachment theory and British psychoanalysis, and it's about the depth of the attachment between a caretaker and a child. And I just, when I was 12 years old and reached puberty and started a new school, and all of a sudden I was transformed in some way that I don't quite understand to this day. Well, I found out I was actually, instead of being no athlete at all, I was the fastest runner in 3 schools. And girls.
You want to show us a little bit of that right now, Peter?
Yeah. I'm still trying to recover it since the stroke. I have not run since the stroke.
Yeah.
And every time I start to
You
run,
ran before.
the caretakers jump on me and hold me back.
I.e.
Ginger makes me promise not to try to run by myself.
Yeah.
And I have a caretaker who's an enormous man who's
PT.
capable of a physical therapist. I have
He's a PT.
He's actually both a personal trainer and a PT.
Personal trainer, yeah.
He's really a
Oh,
personal
yeah,
trainer
physical
with
therapist.
a lot of physical therapy, and he. Everybody tells me that I'm not going to run on their time.
Yeah, but then they took up boxing.
Oh,
They're doing boxing.
Oh, that's so much, that's so
I
much
don't
better.
think we were.
So much better.
I don't know that we wanted to get into that. But,
yeah. Well,
he's a former
No.
kickboxer, and when I told him that I was, one of the things that was very hard for me to deal with was I no longer felt that I could shock anybody who wanted to mess with me physically. I just wasn't like that anymore.
Yeah.
He said, "Well, I'm a former boxer. Why don't I try giving you some boxing training, and it might be wonderful for you."
nice.
My left side was weak, so
It's really good eye-hand
I had to
coordination.
learn to
And
throw my
Sure.
left
Yeah,
hook
yeah.
again and
Mhm.
punch and do all that
Mhm.
stuff. And
Be careful, everybody. Peter's back.
Yeah.
He's back in the
And,
ring to shock everybody with his physical prowess.
So
and
this
that's the kind of kid I was. And
Yep.
I was a
Yeah.
very do not mess with me kid, very unusual for a little Jewish intellectual kid.
You had a
I
lot to
was,
protect.
I was desperate to protect my pride and to protect my value and my worth.
well, and
Your
I
heart
think,
and
and
your
his
Now,
heart.
interestingly, just before COVID, I wrote my last paper outside of the COVID field, 2018-19.
Yeah.
And the theme of the paper was what I think is the deepest human struggle. And what I concluded was that most people who are really feeling desperate in any way at all are convinced that they're not deserving of love. That's the deepest issue for us all.
Mhm.
Little did I even think about then being Jewish that that's the whole message of Christianity, is to try to redeem that.
Right.
It's trying to, Christianity is so successful because it addresses exactly that. It tells Jesus interrupts the flow of the Old Testament and starts to talk about love. And, he says that I've got these new commandments to give you, that you're supposed to not only love God, but love one another. And
can we go back for a second? I want to go back to the decision to be in psychiatry, because I still feel like, for me in today's world, psychiatry as it stands in 10-minute appointments and things like that is almost void of connection, and other things like, social emotional things,
well,
relationships.
this is something I
all of
have
that.
talked
Like,
about before. So, folks, forgive me if you're going to hear a little bit again about the turning point in my whole career in life. I was a freshman at college, at Harvard College. I was in a special program in American History and Literature, and which was itself an honors program. You had to get into it, and it was an open road to go on, be a lawyer or a professor, something like that. And I was sitting around one day studying, and a buddy came in and said, "Pete, I'm starting a volunteer program." My big brother, who was ahead of him at Harvard, started a volunteer program at the local state mental hospital. I got a car tomorrow. How about you come along? You've been studying too hard anyway. Get yourself off the chair, which is still an important thing I have to remember. Get out of the chair, for God's sakes. I went out to the state mental hospital, and it's just a prelude story to that. When I was 10, my parents we went out to a family movie theater. I don't know what we were going to watch. And in those days, they had something called Movie Tone News, which was a big, flashy news program that went on in the theaters
During the war,
during the war.
World War II.
It was probably about 1945 or 46. I would have been 10 years old in 46. War was not over yet. It was coming. It was beginning to end. And the camps, what that movie Till Noon showed was a Nazi extermination camp being liberated by U.S. soldiers. And it was very moving. I think they forced the people in the community to walk through the camp. I don't know if that's just a story I've read or if that was a part of the movie. The mayor had to come look at it, and it was full of feeling. And my memory is of very scrawny Jewish people hanging on a fence, staring out with bulging eyes as the soldiers came and tried to talk with them. And a lot of things went through my head, and I think I dropped behind the seat to hide, and my mother may have helped cover me up or something, and I heard my father say, no, he's got to watch this. So I was propped up to watch it, and I did watch it, and I concluded some very aggressive things and some very loving things. I mean, I felt actual, I think, terror of what would happen if I fell in love with a Jewish girl and they killed her. And I guess still I was looking for love early on. I hadn't thought about that part of it, the story. Pieces come back. And I said, no one is going to take me alive into a concentration camp. I won't go there. That won't happen. And so it was like in that moment, I chose A, to be a fighter, and B, that I wasn't going to let them take me and my family away. And I also vaguely knew that I had lost an aunt in the Holocaust. Nothing very direct. And then later, a rather cruel uncle of mine showed me photos he had taken of a torture chamber when he liberated a Nazi concentration camp. These are extermination camps. And I'm not even going to hint at what it looked like, but it was just overwhelming and made me dreadfully afraid of, being captured and tortured, and determined to be a fighter as best I could be. One of the blessings that you never know the funny ways family work out. My father and brother, who were obviously the big adults, males in the family, my older brother, neither one of them really frightened me or intimidated me. They just were ineffective. So I felt a certain strength even when I was young. If I felt like if I cocked my fist back at one of them, I wasn't going to get killed, which happens to children. Mm. And so I had a certain amount of room to grow just by my own meanness and their ineffectiveness, basically. And my brother's gone now. My father's gone now. My mother's gone now. This may be the first time I've talked about them on the air since they've all been gone.
Yeah, I think so.
Because my brother was more recent.
Thank you.
It's comforting not to have to worry about offending them. But I developed a real toughness. Bessie helped a lot with that. I wasn't going to use her name today. She, the black child who was taking care of me, would get between me and my brother, and if I did something like bite him, she'd congratulate me on defending myself. So she definitely gave me some spirit. Or she'd run up if my mother was going to slap my hand for something, saying, "Don't hit him, Mr. Breggin. He didn't mean, Miss Breggin, he didn't mean any harm," or whatever. So I did have that influence that was going on. And you can see the building, the making right in front of my eyes as I talk about this, of a social critic. I mean, it's just...
Yeah.
I mean, I thought I was a little black child, I'm sure.
Yep.
And in later years when we wrote the War Against Children of Color. The way that book came about, I was traveling to Great Britain.
This is in 1990s.
Via Arizona to give some talks in Arizona and then Great Britain. And Ginger called one night and said, "This amazing thing is going on, honey." Said this, a black woman is reported to the Washington Post that she was at a conference of the leading mental health people in the country. And at the conference, one of the directors of one of the big institutes, which doesn't exist anymore.
NIH Institute, though.
An NIH Institute. The director had compared black children to rhesus monkeys who just want to fight and have sex or something like that, and
reproduce.
And reproduce, yeah.
Mm.
And
this was in the 90s.
Uh-huh. At a DC conference, government professionals. Nobody reported this when it happened. Great big auditorium. One
secretary
who was African American went to the Washington Post.
So Ginger said, "I want to look into this." I said, "Honey, I'm too busy. Look at me. I'm giving talks here in Arizona, and then we're flying to Great Britain, give a talk in London. I think that's what I was doing."
Something like that.
I said, I don't think we should do this. Well, we had some very good connections in the black community from our work in psychosurgery, because I had found out that they had a big project of highly experimental surgery, brain surgery for psychiatric control purposes of children in Mississippi, not at Ole Miss, at Jackson, University in Jackson.
This was in the 1970s.
And I'd blown the whistle on that. And
it was before we were together when he was doing the anti-stop the lobotomies campaign.
And I'd worked with a lot of African Americans directly, and felt incredibly comfortable around them. You'd think I'd be uncomfortable, and normally, coming from my background, if you didn't know who raised me, but I felt at home among black people, and I eventually would do things like go right into the inner cities and meet the gangs and talk with them about what I was doing. And
he gave a major address to Harlem, and I still have pieces of it in video.
Yeah, that was
from the 1990s when we were doing
the church of that big Harlem leader. He wasn't there on that day. What was his name?
I don't remember, honey.
The biggest name among the Harlem leaders. Forget his name now. He's always getting into trouble.
It's okay.
But, now, you can imagine the suspicion I might be dealt with in the beginning, and as soon as I start talking about what I was doing, I would get nothing but love and appreciation. But so Ginger paid no attention whatsoever to what I had said about I'm overworked and I don't have time. She just took it on herself, and she called down to John Conyers' office, wasn't it, honey?
I think either that or Stokes, but I don't remember.
One of the leading people who I knew, and I
reached his head. That they have staff. I reached his head staff member, and she got a hold of the transcript for me and met with me, and we were off and running, because this was the most senior mental health. Oh, he was the most senior psychiatrist.
He was the most senior psychiatrist
in the federal government.
Frederick
at that
Goodwin.
time.
I don't mind his name. Frederick Goodwin. And as I always start when I start talking to African American audience, I would say, "I'm the Jewish one. Fred Goodwin sounds Jewish, but Peter Breggin is Jewish. Frederick Goodwin, the villain here, is not Jewish."
Calls it like it is.
And oh God, it gives me chills to just think about some of these situations I would be in.
Yes.
They were very exciting and interesting days, and I addressed the Black Caucus and
Oh, you went
in
and
Congress.
you went and testified at one of those big hearings, This, by the way, this project, we refer to it a lot on our website, and we usually refer to it as the Violence
The
Initiative.
which
because
is what we were fighting was the violence.
That's what we were
The
fighting.
Youth Prevention Violence Initiative, to go into the inner cities of America to find out why Black children are violent. And whereas I always thought to myself when I was young that if I were a Black person and putting up with what Black people put up with, that I would probably be dead by the time I was 16, because I was putting it together with my Holocaust reactions probably.
Sure.
And I don't even know why I just brought that up, honey.
That's okay. When after Peter testified, I was with him and I watched his testimony at that Senate hearing regarding the Violence Initiative. He had been called, and who was it who wanted you on TV? It was Nightline, right? Nightline had arranged for us to go directly from the hearing over to Nightline in their big high-rise building in DC. And we arrive and we're just on time, and they have the lobby person who takes your name and rings up. And we're being sent up, and then somebody jumps out of the other elevator and rushes over and says, "You can't get on the elevator.
You're canceled.
You're canceled. You can't get on the elevator. You're not going on the show. You can't talk to anyone. You
said,
can't
well,
talk to
let
Ted
me go
Koppel."
upstairs and talk to the producer. And
He said, "Absolutely not." And we were
you're not permitted on the floor.
escorted out of the building. So
Little did you know that that would be the first time you were canceled, but not the
Exactly.
last. You've been canceled many times.
there was a
since
lot.
then.
That was the era, the early 90s, when the big pharmaceutical companies and the whole pharmaceutical complex put the lid on critical analysis and any kind of opposition
Yes.
to
Silence.
through the media.
They were permitted to do direct to media to the public advertising of drugs for the first time. And when that happened, I got thrown off the major media.
This is
Okay.
because the major media made all of their money practically from the psychiatric drugs company. And lo and behold, they had just taken cigarettes out of the picture. The media couldn't make money from cigarettes anymore. And
Think of that.
in came the drug companies to fill the void.
That's a really smart
That's a good
connection right there,
connection.
I have to say, because very good connection, because that was when Big Tobacco went through all of their court proceedings and things like that too, and they took them
Yeah.
off the air. That's interesting. So they needed another big backer, which would have been
And
Big
boy, are
Pharma.
we familiar with that now after watching all the COVID years with the Pfizer emblems behind the legacy media,
Oh.
right? When they're doing all their programs.
Okay, so to tie this back to where you had started, Peter, we were asking you about like becoming a psychiatrist, because there's so much irony in all of this.
Yeah.
Knowing how much you
Well, I
love
start out
psychiatric
as a-
medication.
I started out as a volunteer at the state hospital.
Oh, right. That's
Yeah.
what we were.
That's where we
Yeah.
were. And
Yep.
I see these big buildings looming in front. It was just amazing to drive up the hill. These places were generally built on hills outside of cities.
Were
And
they Gothic?
Yeah,
Sure.
they were
Yes,
Gothic
sure.
looking.
Mhm.
And often one of the buildings at least was going to look like just trying to make you scared. And going onto the wards and through the steel doors and the big clanking keys, being told that's a Radcliffe student. This pile of rags is lying on the floor, and it's a Radcliffe student. And I'm thinking to myself, yeah, but for the grace of God, go on. I could be in a place like this. I'm nip and tuck. I'm surviving at Harvard.
Yeah.
And was really scared in the beginning. Didn't know what to make of it. Again, and I'm like, don't mess with me is my stance. And I'm in the women's violent ward, and women are coming up to me. They're so happy to see a young man in a suit and tie, jacket and tie, because she wore them in Harvard. And they come up to me and they're petting my coat, and one woman's asking if she can take my watch and polish it for me. And I'm thinking, she's going to steal my watch. And somebody else is asking me if I can polish my shoes. And they're just so happy to see me. And I realize I'm with people who are desperate.
Mm-hmm.
Women are coming up to me and saying, I don't belong in here. I haven't seen my children in 10 years or 20 years. Or could you take messages to my children? Well, ma'am, I don't know how I would do that.
This was pre-psychiatric drugs in the institutions. This was the
people
old,
were still alive.
Right.
Looking, except for some of the lobotomized patients. I saw some lobotomized patients. I became so familiar around the hospital, I could go anywhere I wanted. I ended up, because I needed a set of keys to take the volunteers around, I ended up with a set of keys. I could go anywhere I wanted in the hospital. I was a fixture. I saw electroshock. And I remember, insulin coma shock, where they overdose you with insulin. You fall on the floor and you're shaking in a seizure and you're unconscious. And I could see how it worked. The patient would come in looking miserable and angry and resistant, didn't want to be there and maybe terrified. And then you give them an insulin shock and they wake up and you're feeding them sugar water, the aids are, or whatever they're doing. And the patient is, thank you. Am I okay? Where am I? And this was the cure, was this docility and helplessness. And I'm looking at this through clear eyes of a college freshman. No one's told me or forced me to see this before, and you couldn't convince me this was a treatment. This was an abuse. Horrible abuse. And so I thought, well, maybe this is what I'm supposed to be doing. Maybe I'm supposed to do something about this place.
So you immediately thought about changing it.
Yeah, I thought about, we're going to build this big program, and I ended up running the program, and actually had an impact on psychiatry that was quite considerable. We got written up quite extensively in a big volume on progress in mental health put out by the National Institute of Mental Health, one of its last social, psychologically oriented documents they ever put out. And we were mentioned a lot in our program. And I also got a bit of fame. I had my picture in the Saturday Evening Post, the biggest newspaper at the time, biggest magazine. I don't know if they were online then or still publishing.
I have that picture.
I think it was.
Well, I got one behind me, and you're not on front of my Saturday Evening Post canvas right here, Peter. So I'm gonna work on swapping that one out and put your picture on there.
You hear that?
Yeah, I heard that.
It's a picture of me kneeling beside.
It was inside the magazine.
I'm kneeling and holding the hand of a woman patient who's lying on a bench.
Yeah.
On a hard wooden bench.
A young, beautiful college student patient.
No, I don't think so.
She was beautiful.
Oh, she
Yeah, I did notice that.
You noticed that?
Of course you would notice that, Ginger.
Yeah.
I would.
But I plead not guilty.
Okay.
No,
to
honey, it
whatever
was
the-
fine.
Whatever the implications are. And
I
I managed to convince
I do not
these-
recall.
Yeah, I taking the fifth on that one.
Yeah.
I'm cuter than that guy, aren't I?
Yes.
more believable.
I know
Oh my
what you're
gosh.
talking about.
I
I
look
know
more
what you're
Oh.
Touche.
I
Yeah, go ahead.
never taken the fifth in court. I began to think about doing a book, and I wrote my first book about that. And I put a lot in the book about love, and a lot of it was taken out by the editors who were from Harvard Psychiatry department, and a lot of the others weren't. And I talked about that what these people needed was contact with human beings and love.
Oh, this was the book that you
Caring.
co-authored with the others.
Yeah, I got it right here. Here it is. God bless it. And this will be the first time I've ever advertised this book. College students in a mental hospital.
Look at that. Look at
An
that.
account of organized social contacts between college volunteers and mental patients in a hospital community. This is definitely a first by Carter Umbarger, who I think I appointed as director after I left. So they kept up and they finished the book. I'm the fourth author.
You're the last author.
And it says
That
here,
apparently means something now.
yeah.
Save the
And
best
it
for
says
last.
with an
is what that
introduction
means.
by David Cantor and Milton Greenblatt. Milton Greenblatt was the director of research at Harvard's Mental Health Center.
And this got acknowledged as by the JFK administration, Peter, this volunteer program, right?
That I don't remember.
So here you are in school for psychiatry, whistleblowing and kind of breaking all the rules
Well, no,
because
I'm not in school.
you're not there yet.
I'm
Okay,
an
'cause
undergraduate.
He's
you're still
18.
an undergrad.
And I'm studying.
still an
I'm
undergrad.
studying American history and literature.
Okay.
But I'm in
So
a
how'd
program.
you get your way to this next step? So you're already talking about love at this age. This was
I
already
was thinking about it. I was very lonely. I was
Okay.
heartbroken. My heart was broken until I met Ginger and she healed it.
And vice versa,
And that was, when was that? That was 19.
84,
We met for
42 years.
We've been married for 42 years.
How long have you been a psychiatrist?
Well, I went to medical school in 1962. No. I went to Harvard in 54, then in 58 to med school. 62, I'm getting into my residency at Harvard. I already knew the people there.
Yep.
And that's how I got in, I'm sure. And
Okay.
So how did you get into psychiatry?
So I went to the superintendent of our hospital and I said, these people are starving to see volunteers. Why don't we set up a program for them? And I'd already talked to a social worker and he said he'd supervise us. And we'll do therapy with these people. We'll learn to be case aides, sort of.
Mhm.
Instead of just visiting people haphazardly, each of us will have a patient. It'll be a special program. He said, he said something to this effect. Well, first of all, we have to understand who runs the hospital. I do and you don't. And I thought to myself, oh my God, I'm threatening him. What the hell's going on?
Mm-hmm.
Wasn't the first time.
Threatening status quo is what you were doing.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yep.
Already then.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Well, thanks to Dave Cantor, who went on to become a very creative, professional person. He was a young social worker then. And he supervised us. And we got almost everybody out of the hospital. Almost everybody we helped.
And you had 11 or 12 patients and volunteers.
We had about 15 total in the program.
Wait, through therapeutic connection.
Yes.
And these were the back ward patients that the volunteers couldn't hurt.
Yeah,
So this is what we talk about this a lot.
they gave us
that-
people so sick we couldn't hurt them.
Yes.
They're lobotomizing people, literally, massively ill, shocking and above, and they're worried about we're going to hurt them. And
You're going to hurt them with connection.
the Boston Psychoanalytic Association made a formal protest of our program, that we were untrained, we were going to hurt the people.
Oh.
It was fascinating. The program was very successful, and I loved it at the hospital. They got all kinds of great publicity, local, then national, in the Saturday Evening Post. They loved that.
Who didn't love that?
Yeah, it was probably the only positive publicity a state hospital ever got. And so I found that just talking to people was a real help to them.
Who knew?
And I wasn't doing a deep therapy or trying to. I wasn't asking questions and stuff. I was just making friends. And
Listen, Jenn and I had probably, I think, one of the best clinical supervisors ever, because she told us the same thing. She said to me straight up, she goes, "It does not matter the prescribed intervention." And this is with inmates, okay? This is with male inmates. What matters the most is the relationship, not an inappropriate one, but the therapeutic relationship. The relational pieces is what moves the needle. And we have collectively in mental health decided that that doesn't matter.
Yeah, absolutely.
What matters is interventions like shocking your brain or TMS therapy or chemical castration. Like that's what matters more than humanity and connection. And that's what gets me every frickin' time.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it was so clear in the state mental hospital what people needed. They needed some
Very
love
clear.
and attention. And
It's clear in prisons too.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's alive and well in a prison culture. That is what you describe as what is still very real. Like we may not be lobotomizing people, but all the other things are still there today, present day, 2026.
yeah,
That's exactly what is still there. And it's still the big buildings and the big, huge keys and the very large metal doors.
abuse of men.
Yes, and people laying without basic human needs in tiny, tiny little spaces and are left to their own devices with nothing but a washcloth if they're lucky. Like that is all still very, very real. And it is interesting, the idea of human connection and how much that changes the game. Like in the prison system, we couldn't say the word love because we'd get fired because that meant that we were off doing something we shouldn't with an inmate.
Yeah, right.
Okay. But the idea of connection within love, human connection, that is what we could foster as clinicians. We had to do it very carefully because, of course, there was always something malicious that everyone thought we were always doing as clinicians because that's how we're treated in a prison. We're the touchy-feely, fluffy people, and we aren't seen as the authoritarian thing as what people need. But that's what was missing. It really can be that simple.
Well, it's that simple in all of our lives.
Yeah.
But, we all need more love than we're getting, almost all of us. And then we're giving. And by the way you get love, folks, is by being determined in giving it. And this woman has given me so much love. I will love her through eternity.
I hope you gave her the big closet, Peter. She needs the big one, not the little closet.
I gave her own room in the house.
You guys had told me that when I was on your show and you were telling the story of moving in together, and I'm like, this is so damn cute.
Yeah, I asked him if I could have like a little corner of the attic, a little grotto space in order to be able to write. And I arrive and there's this whole room converted from my office.
I even got her stationery.
Yeah, he did.
So how? Okay,
big kid, guys. You got to learn about how to treat a woman. And I got a calligrapher to do a great big sign to put over the bed, saying, "Welcome, Ginger. Welcome to love."
Aw,
It was so sweet.
I outdid myself.
You did.
I even had a bottle of champagne delivered to her on the airplane.
You did.
I outdid myself. That's
set
great.
the bar like really high, Peter. All of our male audience right now is like, someone turn this off. Shut this man down. Like,
this is the truth, guys.
Well, the very best thing is we drive to his house. The first night, he's just picked me up at the airport. He says, "I have to walk the dog." And he goes, and I'm standing outside because he's bringing the dog out. And I've never met the dog. This is the first time I've been there. We'd only known each other 7 days. Anyway, he opens the back door. He lets the dog out, and it's a Shetland sheepdog. And I grew up with 3 Shetland sheepdogs in my life when I was in my childhood. And it was like a sign from God. I mean, it's like, oh boy, I am really home now.
And then for the first time, my older Shelty's eyes cleared up and he could see.
Yeah, he lived another 2 years. He was
Oh my
15.
gosh.
He lived until he was 17.
Ginger's the miracle.
As we're wrapping this up, I do have a question for you. So this is for our listeners here. How do psychiatric medications impair our ability to love?
They crush the functioning of the highest centers of the brain. And whether you use shock treatment for that or a lobotomist scalpel to cut, or whether you drench it with a neurotoxin, psychiatric drugs make brain cells sick. That's why people have all these problems with them. The toxins, they're actually sickening your cells, even killing them. And since the toxin's spreading throughout your whole brain, once it crosses the blood-brain barrier, there's no place it's not going to go to through the circulatory system. It's going to hit the highest centers along with everything else. So once it saturates the stuff that's in your front of your brain, you are no longer having your full faculties. So it just depends on what you want to measure to determine what you've lost. And because the frontal lobes vary from psychologist to psychologist in their description, depending on what the psychologist thinks life is about. The frontal lobes are about your life.
Oh, wow.
So if you're trying to be pseudoscientific and business, like you call it, you get interested in executive
function.
Yeah.
Well, what the hell is that? That's just a person doing and behaving. And everything's affected and everything is blunted, sickened. All feeling, all intuition, spirituality, abstract reasoning.
Your connectedness to everything outside of yourself.
And it does this without making you sedated. That's what the biggest breakthrough was in psychiatry, was finding these drugs that would lobotomize you. The initial one was Thorazine, and then Haldol quickly follow. And the guys who did this knew they were researching, and it's the beginning of the collaboration with pharmaceutical companies. They knew they were researching neurotoxins because it was poisoning neurological functions. Patients would inevitably get Parkinson's disease as long as they were on the drugs. They had Parkinson's disease. You know, it's flatter than I am now. I'm still not quite back to normal. And the result of that is you're more docile. And you do better in a structured environment. You'll put up with it. You'll obey it. And but you're losing your finer tuning, your ability to really be there, fully present in a loving way. Love is the highest function, I believe. And we were chatting beforehand. I don't think any of this was on tape about the book I was writing, or I almost finished writing just before COVID, was called Anti-Love Drugs. I thought, this is such a fabulous title. It's going to be a bestseller. And I had several agents, including one who was a really top agent, who couldn't get anybody to take it. So there's still a book out there someday to go called Anti-Love Drugs. And that's, I think, basically what they do. And I've worked with women who were put on these drugs when their children were born. And the marriage, you're both raising your hands.
Yeah, we are.
And the marriage has got more and more difficult at that point, as stresses of the raising kids, not having proper support system, and your hormones are crashing from the delivery and everything. And I've worked with a number of women who that's when they got on the drugs, so they never initially connected well with their children. And the amazing thing is to see these 20 years later, and they're actually going to their grown children, 20-year-old children, rebuilding their relationships with them off the drugs now, and
Sure.
talking about the terrible effects that happened from their not being sensitive or as loving as they wanted to be. Because it's very hard to raise children and be unconditionally loving. I mean, it's a balance. Raising children is a balance between teaching them what they have to know, including setting limits and giving them an absolute pure love while you're doing it. It's like you have to be a magician to do this. You have to be Jesus. You have to be a real Christian, this Jew says.
Mm-hmm.
And that always stops me to think about it a little more. But love is the most healing thing there is in the world. And we've been watching lately this, it's okay to mention that.
Oh, sure.
We've been really intensely watching this essentially Christian series. It's called The
Chosen.
The Chosen.
Uh-huh.
It's very moving.
We just discovered it this summer.
Mm-hmm.
We're now watching it for a second time. And you should watch it with somebody who's good at remembering faces and names and putting things together and is slightly smarter than you. Not maybe
Good to know.
maybe considerably smarter. I can only bear figure slightly.
Actually, I think we're on our 4th time through now because it's so peace-giving to just watch that. We don't watch any other television at all.
It's about Jesus and mostly about the
Apostles.
the individual apostles and the people who are packing in around Jesus.
And that whole period of time when Jesus did his life's work on earth before the resurrection.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really wonderful on a whole
It's a lot about love.
series of levels, and it is about love.
And how do you watch it on TV? Well, it has a
Oh, you can get it from Amazon Prime.
from Amazon Prime.
Yeah, it's
And
available.
it's also got, what is that thing called when you have
It has an app
has an app?
also,
Thank you.
and it's available on its
See, you
own
marry a
app.
younger woman, you do good.
Actually, what you do is you marry a techie. That's me.
Yeah, exactly. That's better.
I
You
designed.
marry somebody who just wants to help you do whatever you want to do, and you're the
That's-
best man on the face of the earth when that happens.
Well, I talk about this a lot, guys. I say be with someone who is your biggest fan and be their biggest fan back.
Yeah.
And I feel
Very
like
good.
that's the key to a good relationship. So any final words on love before we wrap up this episode?
Well, love is the answer to all conflict resolution, because when we love someone, we actually learn, if we can keep our heads together and not get nutty about it, to care as much about another human being as we do about ourselves. And that means you're as interested in their well-being as your own. And this is magic. How can you fight with somebody when you care about their well-being as much as your own? And when they're giving you the same treatment, they're loving you. So if you can keep that in mind, folks, you could restart your whole marriage. You could restart everything. And some things might not work because maybe you don't have a partner who loves you that much. But if you can love your partner as much as you would love yourself, love thy neighbor as thyself, love your partner as yourself, you will end all conflict, because your conversations, you'll be as interested in them as you are in yourself. Changes everything. And this is true on all levels of life. That's why they were going to keep flooding our nation with people who are uncomfortable here, because they want to undermine the love within the nation, because we put the nation back together after the Civil War. Southerners love Americans, just like just like their own people. And although I must say I grew up in a family that hated Southerners, real liberal, left-wing viewpoint.
And new to the country and scared.
New to the country and scared and go
Yeah,
through the
because
Holocaust.
your family were immigrants.
Yeah. Terrified of anti-Semitism.
Yeah.
All right.
Boy,
I don't mean to cut us off, but we are well past the hour.
Out of time.
And I'm just sitting here listening to your life story, and I feel very blessed that we've been able to log this for you. So if you this will be part of your legacy, I sure hope. And yeah, we're gonna wrap that up for today.
I want to try to write about this for my next book and really find and get it published.
Yes, get it published this time. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah.
He knows a
All
publisher now.
right. Exactly.
That's the other thing that this woman did. When we realized we couldn't get our books published anymore, she became a publisher.
That's
Lake Edge Press with Ginger Breggin.
Woman of many talents. I love
Wow.
it. All right. All right. Well, if you've hung out with us this long, this has been the Gaslit Truth Podcast. Please make sure that you like. We love you too. Make sure that you like, comment, subscribe, and check out, all the hearts in the world to you guys.
Hearts for
and
Peter.
Make sure, if you don't already know, Peter and Ginger Breggin, thank you for taking the time out of your life to share that with us and our listeners. That's a wrap for us today, folks.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
God bless you.